Friedrich Nietzsche. You've probably heard the name. He's one of history's most powerful thinkers, but also one of the most dangerously misunderstood. Seriously, his ideas were like philosophical dynamite, and we're still feeling the shockwaves today.
So, let's just dive right in and tackle the biggest, darkest shadow hanging over his name, shall we? For decades, his whole legacy has been this brutal tug-of-war. Was he the guy who basically invented the philosophy for the Nazis, or was he a total genius whose work got tragically and deliberately twisted?
Okay, so to really get who Nietzsche was, we first have to talk about who he wasn't. And believe me, the story of how his ideas got bent out of shape, it's like a textbook example of how philosophy, in the wrong hands, can be turned into a weapon. And this is where it gets crazy. The gap between the myth and the reality it's huge. You had these authoritarian regimes claiming him as their own, but Nietzsche himself, he despised everything they stood for. He literally called nationalism a sickness and was super outspoken against the anti-Semitism that was bubbling up in Germany back then.
So how on earth did this happen? Well, it wasn't an accident. It was a deliberate campaign of distortion. They took his incredibly complex ideas, stripped them of all their nuance, and just hammered them into these brutish, simple slogans. You know, his idea of the will to power, that wasn't about crushing other people. It was about mastering yourself. And the superhuman, that wasn't some master race nonsense. It was about reaching a state of incredible individual creative greatness. But all that subtlety? Yeah, it got completely bulldozed for the sake of propaganda.
And here's the kicker, this whole distortion was basically a family affair. It's wild. After Nietzsche had a complete mental breakdown and eventually died, his sister, Elisabeth, got her hands on all his unpublished work. And what did she do? She edited it. She rearranged it. She even rewrote parts of it to make it fit her own nationalist anti-Semitic ideology. She essentially created a fake Nietzsche that the Nazis could then hold up as their hero.
All right, so if he wasn't this big nationalist boogeyman, then what was he actually on about? What problem was he trying to solve? Well, Nietzsche looked out at the world around him, at modern society, and he saw a civilization that was, well, sick. He thought we were suffering from a deep spiritual crisis.
He diagnosed the sickness, and the cause, in his view, was something he called petrified morality. Think about that. Petrified. Like a fossil. He was arguing that we were all living by this moral code that was thousands of years old, and it had just hardened. It had become rigid, and now it was holding us back, preventing us from growing.
And he was very specific about what he meant. He took aim at two of the biggest pillars of Western thought: Greco-Roman morality and Judeo-Christian values. Now, he wasn't saying they were always bad. He argued that, yeah, these systems were essential back in the day for organizing societies. But now, he believed they had totally outlived their usefulness. They were built for a different world, for a different kind of person, and in our modern era, they've become a cage.
So, from his perspective, these old rules, the ones that are presented to us as these absolute unchanging truths coming from God or from pure reason, were actually denying life. He thought they were stifling the very things that make us human: our creativity, our imagination, our courage, all the instincts that push us to explore and become something more.
Okay, so if the old values are broken, what's the fix? What's the solution? This is where we get to Nietzsche's most famous and, surprise, surprise, most misunderstood ideas. See, he wasn't arguing for chaos or for getting rid of morality altogether. He was calling for us to create a new one, to forge our own.
First up, let's talk about the will to power. Right away, just forget that whole dominating other people thing. That's not it at all. For Nietzsche, the will to power is this fundamental internal drive inside every single living thing. It's that force that makes a tiny seed burst through concrete, or an artist push through exhaustion to finish their masterpiece. It's about overcoming your own obstacles to achieve self-mastery. It's the drive to be the most you can be.
And that brings us to the superhuman, or Ubermensch. This is the person who truly gets it, who fully channels that will to power. Again, this has nothing to do with a master race. It's about a brave individual who has the guts to create their own moral universe, to define their own values. I mean, look at these examples. You've got people like Napoleon, Da Vinci, Martin Luther. These were individuals who didn't just play by the rules, they shattered them. They forged something brand new, and in doing so, they redefined what was possible for all of us.
Okay, this all leads to what might be Nietzsche's most profound and personal challenge. It's a thought experiment, really, a test, and it's designed to ask you one simple question. Are you really, truly living a life that you would say yes to, completely and without regrets? He calls it the eternal return. And the idea is this. Just imagine for a second that time isn't a straight line. Imagine it's a circle, and this life you're living right now, you're going to live it again and again and again, forever. Every single moment, every joy, every heartbreak, every mistake, every victory, it's all going to repeat exactly as it was for all of eternity. Now, you have to understand how radical this is. It's a complete break from how we usually think about time, right? The typical Western or Christian view is that life is a one-way street. You're born, you live, and then there's a final judgment or reward at the end. There's a finish line. Nietzsche is saying, what if there is no finish line? What if it's an endless loop? He wants us to embrace the cycle.
And so here's the ultimate test he puts to us. If you knew you had to live this exact life over and over forever, would you be thrilled or would you be horrified? The goal isn't to live a perfect life. Nobody does that. The goal is to live a life that's so yours, so authentic, that you would joyfully embrace its return. To be able to look at the whole thing, the good and the bad, the pain and the beauty, and shout, yes, do it again. That, for Nietzsche, is the absolute peak of what it means to be alive.
So after he was gone, and despite all those awful misinterpretations, Nietzsche's actual ideas started to bubble up and really resonate with people. He was anything but forgotten. In fact, his work sent these massive shockwaves through the 20th century, and honestly, they're still shaping how we think today.
And his influence wasn't just stuck in some dusty corner of philosophy. No way. It absolutely exploded across the entire landscape of modern culture. We're talking psychology, literature, art, movies, you name it. He forced pretty much every creative and intellectual field to wrestle with these really uncomfortable questions about God, about morality, about what it even means to be human.
And look at this list. This is just a tiny sample of the giants who were inspired by him. Sigmund Freud, Albert Camus, Stanley Kubrick. The list goes on and on. From the very beginnings of psychoanalysis to existentialist philosophy to the novels we read and the films we watch, you can see his fingerprints everywhere. That was his real genius. He didn't just hand out easy answers. He taught us how to ask tougher, more important questions. So to wrap this all up, let's turn Nietzsche's challenge back on ourselves, on you. It's been over a century, but his call to action feels more urgent than ever, doesn't it? The challenge is this. Have the courage to actually look at the values you live by, figure out which ones are holding you back, and then cast them off. And in their place, forge a life that you would be absolutely thrilled to live again and again forever.